I guess, final sort of trajectory to kind of bring this home for the coffee sector, right? In the 1960s, where we had the government kind of leading, right? We had the International Coffee Agreement. So literally a UN government set price, right? When did that end? In the 80s under neoliberalism, right? So now we have, more corporate control, right? We went back to the C price, which has evolved over time. But the 1990s, that is when certifications came up. So yes, certifications are a nonprofit, but why did they start? Because they were filling the gap that was in the government. There's no more government regulation of companies, and so as a consumer, how do you know which company to buy from? How do you know which company is telling you the truth? And so certifications came up as a sort of way to kind of regulate somewhat the actions of companies and fill those gaps.
Is your coffee business ready for the next stage of growth? Grow Your Coffee Business is our most popular mastermind group, and a new group is starting in August. This 3-month online program is for coffee producers, roasters, and cafe owners ready to expand, evolve, and adapt. We'll meet every second week for 2 hours and work on understanding your numbers, managing risks, setting realistic goals, and using ChatGPT to grow smarter, not just bigger. Join a supportive group of like-minded business owners and build your plan for 2025 and 26. Apply now at mapitforward.coffee/group coaching or click the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series with Nora Burkey from the Chain Collaborative. Nora, welcome to the podcast for the very first time.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am really grateful that you have agreed to come on the podcast. Since Darren Daniel came on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were having this conversation about the role of nonprofits and NGOs in the industry, I left that conversation, that wonderful conversation with Darren, I left it with a lot of questions. And you are the perfect person for me to ask those questions to. So I'm really, really grateful for you to be here and to help me kind of navigate this space. In this series, folks, we are talking about, will the development sector survive in coffee? Now, Nora, in this episode, we're going to talk about the history of the development sector in coffee. Before we get started with that, will you tell everybody what the Chain Collaborative is, what your role is in it?
Yes, absolutely. So the Chain Collaborative is a US-based nonprofit. So by US-based, I mean we are registered in the US, but our work is international because we work with coffee communities around the world. So essentially our mission is to invest in local leaders in coffee communities around the world. And we invest in their visions for the future and their visions for development, essentially. So that's one of the things we do. We also do some consulting throughout the coffee sector, but we're really committed to community-led development. And so that's why I say that we invest exclusively in the visions and the projects of local leaders and the local community-based organizations that we partner with. And so as a small nonprofit, I'm the executive director, which but also means my role is everything from accounting to HR to fundraising. So it's I have a lot of roles that I probably never wanted in my life, like doing the taxes. But yeah, I do a lot of things and have a great team as well.
Specifically, what does the Chain Collaborative hope for the coffee sector?
So we hope and wish that the coffee sector, I would say both kind of the private, public, and civil society within the coffee sector really learns to kind of recognize the efficacy and the value of self-directed development of coffee communities and community-based organizations. I think there's kind of one thing I always say is that the coffee sector does community development in the sense that companies, civil society, other nonprofits, they focus on development projects to benefit coffee communities. But that's distinct from community-led development, where the decisions are being made by the communities themselves. The power rests with them. I think often what we see is consultation and, relying on communities to organize around a project and execute it, but that project is designed, developed, by somebody else, often someone outside of the country, right? And so communities are important to execute the visions of NGOs, companies, governments, but rarely are they invited to lead the process entirely of their own development, right? And whatever that means to them. So we want to see more people shifting to that mindset of community-led development, and also I'm surprised I didn't already share it with you, but there's a great article which I can share with you.
Please.
And I am going to mispronounce his name. He's a Nigerian American. Last name is Iweala, Iweala. And I spell that because I am probably mispronouncing that. But he wrote an article, or I think it was adapted from a speech in Le Monde. And I can send it to you, but it's called Reparations as Philanthropy. And that's kind of the other thing that we hope people kind of walk away from, is that, philanthropy needs to be re-understood as sort of not this kind of, it's not charity. It's actually the money that we have in the global north was taken,
extracted,
right? And it's like extracted, yeah. And it's not our money, right? So therefore we should be giving it back, and we should be not like giving it back on our own terms, right? Like, so that's kind of the philosophy, but also it's so it's kind of moving also to trust-based philanthropy, which is something else that we promote. And so so that is our vision. I think we're very challenged from being able to see much movement in that direction, but that is our vision. Yeah.
And I really appreciate you sharing that with me, because I want to share with people why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I feel very stuck right now understanding why we need NGOs in coffee. I feel very frustrated at the fact that, and I guess I'm frustrated at the fact that I can't find an answer to the fact that if our industry was so successful, if coffee was a successful endeavor, if we were doing this right, why do we need an intermediary that has to fend for the producer? Because before I had the preliminary conversation with you for this conversation, and I walked away with it finally understanding what an NGO really does. From what I understand, please help me and correct me if I'm not right here. I thought NGOs went and kind of like, it wasn't charity work, but you helped at origin. That's not what I understand now. What I understand now is that you guys stick up for people at origin against massive corporates who are trying to take advantage and continue to extract from the global south. Am I understanding that better? At least from what you told me about the Chain Collaborative. Am I understanding that better?
I think, I think it puts a positive spin on nonprofits. I think you're right to move away from the kind of like nonprofit help, right? They do, but that even that framing is already a bit like could be patronizing. The only thing I would say is I don't think that all nonprofits stick up for the small farmer against corporates. I think that there are a lot of nonprofits that actually are arms of corporates,
predatory,
and are basically right, and sort of doing the maybe not predatory, but doing executing the projects that corporates want to design, and sometimes those projects are well-meaning, right? Like it's okay, let's train farmers in increasing their coffee quality, because then they can access, more of a specialized market and ostensibly, ideally, receive more money. But, the benefit to the corporate is better quality coffee, better supply, right? And farmers that are more placated, right? Because they have maybe a little bit more money, or they feel that they're, getting somewhere, or they just stay in coffee, right? Which we're seeing farmers leave. And so I would say it's the true sticking up, for farmers would be flipping that sort of narrative, on its head and saying, like, what do you want to do, and how do you want to develop? And I guarantee it's probably not learning a whole new processing method so that they can please their buyers, right? It would be something else. So I would say, there are many nonprofits that are, advocates and do want to see change within the sector, but we all face the reality that, that's just super hard, and we're all swimming in this ocean, right? And so even for us, like, the way that we go about our work is that we, like I said, we exclusively invest in the visions of our partners, and we don't, say you should do this is going to be good for you. And sometimes farmer groups choose to do things that their buyers, are like, well, I didn't want that project. It's like, well, too bad, it wasn't your idea. You don't have power here. But oftentimes, farmers are choosing projects that are, improving their coffee quality, right? And that's because they know how to play the game, right? They know this is the game. They know this is the ocean that they're swimming in. And so, at least for me, I see that, okay, at least this project was designed by you, right? And your community, and not imposed. And if that's the best that we can do, like, I'm okay with that. Because I know that the farmers are swimming in the same ocean that I am. So that's, but I would say I'm glad that, we can kind of open up the conversation around, like, the kind of positives that the nonprofits, represent. But I'm also, very aware that we're all swimming in this ocean, and that there are some nonprofits out there, just like all companies are different, right? There are some nonprofits that are just doing the bidding of corporations. So yeah.
And I guess the reason I wanted to make that distinction is because I can't understand why we haven't fixed the problems. Like, the whole point is nonprofits should be there to help fix these problems of such an extractionary history that we have in the global south, between the global north and the global south. And I'm confused by it. I'm confused by, is this a parasitic relationship where we keep the global south dependent on the global north just enough, and we give them enough just to survive? Or is this actually something that's permanently broken and it can't be fixed, and now we're just waiting until we get to the end of the runway? And I hope that we can sort of explore, not necessarily an answer, but I think that's going to take a lot of series with a lot of people that work in the nonprofit sector or the development sector to be able to understand this. But I can tell you one thing for sure, that most businesses in consuming countries and in producing countries look at the development sector and see it as a black hole. The number of producers that I spoke to that said mostly the development industry are the ones where they're scared of the most. They're the biggest predators, because we can never see whether they're lying to us, whether they're being honest to us, whether they want something and they have a hidden agenda. They want to take money up front from us for certifications and things like that, and they, never end up actually delivering on what they're saying. There's a whole bunch of things there, right? And that surprised me. That really, really surprised me. So we have to get more representation on this podcast of the development sector. That's become very, very clear to me, so that we can start this dialogue. And I'm really, really grateful that you're where we're starting that with this new kind of line of exploration that we've got Map Forward. So talk to us about the history of the development sector in coffee. Like, we talked about this extractionist history and kind of the fact that we are where we are, But in a year like 2025, where we are doesn't feel like it's anywhere comfortable. Was it always that way? Did we have different hopes of how this was going to turn out? What's that journey over the last, let's say, I don't know how long you want to go back.
80 years, maybe.
Okay, wow.
60?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, yeah, so first I think this will, sharing a bit of the history as I understand it and as I have studied, kind of will change that narrative a little bit around, the role of nonprofits, because in my view, and historically, nonprofits are not designed to fix what is wrong with society.
Right.
And I think that might be I know we're going to talk about misconceptions later, but I think that might be a misconception. So if we go back to kind of the history of nonprofits, and speaking kind of more in the international space, because that's the sort of the coffee sector, the concept of development, right? Like bettering oneself, right? I mean, that's age old, right? You can go back to like any historic, religious text, and there's talk about how you better yourself. So that concept, of course, is not, new. The idea of kind of development as a term that we understand in the international space really only, came up as like a field of study, around the time when things like the United Nations and these, International Monetary Fund and these global kind of organizations were coming together to promote like diplomacy, right, and to promote global cooperation. And so I think we can't like separate the conversation from the growth of just like global cooperation and global economies in general. But nonprofits kind of came out of that, right? So you have the end of the Second World War, and then after that, kind of the launch of the United Nations and the sort of goal of countries being able to work together to avoid something like a third world war. Who knows how successful that's going to be, but so for a while, kind of the work of development and promoting the kind of economic growth of other nations was really something that was kind of within the public sphere, right? Different country representatives were working together, and development was understood, that term was understood only as economic development. How do you ensure the economic growth of other nations, right? Now, of course, there were some nations that were more powerful and predatory, right? That's always been the history of international cooperation. But it wasn't until there was sort of this neoliberal economic movement, which was started around the 1980s, which was promoting this idea of, governments are super inefficient and they should not be the ones to develop, right? We should leave things to the market, the free market, and that will help us develop. That was kind of the neoliberal approach. And so you saw that, there was a lot of deregulation and companies being able to just kind of do what they wanted, right? Without a lot of government regulation. And the idea was that this was going to economically develop the world, right? In my view, you have what was sort of the ideology behind that, right? Is like you have governments that people were saying, well, they're corrupt, and so they're just going to be doing things, for themselves. Now, in a democracy, right, you would be able to control for that by voting certain people out of power, right? And so ideally the government does the will of the people, because if they don't, you don't vote for them, right? Now, of course, not everywhere is a democracy, and politicians lie and this kind of thing. But by shifting things to the corporate side, it was said, well, people are not interested in power in the same way as it is in the government. They're interested in money, right? And so companies are just going to do things to make money, and so they're going to respond to their customers because that's the way they're going to make money. The problem is customers don't always have the right information, and just the same thing as governments, companies can lie, right? They can greenwash.
No.
So, yes, you've never heard of it. Yeah. So, in my mind, it's just like shifting from one profit to another. Now, I know we're talking about nonprofits, so try to bring this all together. When there was more, like less government control of development and then we moved things to the free market, that is when you saw the rise of more nonprofits. Because nonprofits were coming in to essentially fill the gap in regulation that was left by governments, as well as being able to take action on behalf of companies who were trying to do good. Because the companies don't have that expertise. So they were relying on development organizations, NGOs, to do that, also getting tax breaks by being able to put some of their money there. But also they came in to fill the gap. And so one, I guess, final sort of trajectory to kind of bring this home for the coffee sector, right? In the 1960s, where we had the government kind of leading, right? We had the International Coffee Agreement. So literally a UN government set price, right? Mm-hmm. When did that end? In the 80s under neoliberalism, right? So now we have, more corporate control, right? We went back to the C price, which has evolved over time. But the 1990s, that is when certifications came up. So yes, certifications are a nonprofit, but why did they start? Because they were filling the gap that was in the government. There's no more government regulation of companies. And so as a consumer, how do you know which company to buy from? How do you know which company is telling you the truth? And so certifications came up as a sort of way to kind of regulate somewhat the actions of companies and fill those gaps. So that's the history. Things have obviously changed a lot in the last 30 years, but I say all that to suggest that nonprofits were filling a gap in regulation, filling a gap in expertise for kind of action on international cooperation. And that is the role that I see them playing. Not necessarily fixing the problem, because even certifications, the market-based solution, right? So they're not doing anything to change the market as the primary driver of price. And then, as they're kind of there to do projects, often on behalf of companies, again, they're not going to call out those companies too much, right? They rely on funding. So sorry, the podcast, we talk a lot, but I feel like I talked a lot. So I'll turn it back to you.
No, perfect. We're going to end the episode here. And in the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about why do we need development work in the coffee industry. Now that we have the history, and I really appreciate that, Nora, that makes a lot of sense. But, it kind of sprouts more questions now about, now that we know this, why do we actually need this if the specialty coffee movement exists where, we're here to make coffee better? Why do we need nonprofits and the development sector if we should be making coffee better? So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.